My name is Dean, and you are watching Lake Log, and in this episode, a whale is not a flamingo, and a grebe is not a duck, but a grebe is a flamingo. Sort of. And that's where we're going.
The more I learn about birds, the more complex they seem to become. For most of my life, birds have been these mildly amusing, sometimes colorful, often noisy members of the animal world. And now that I know how much I really don't know, bird science is as complex as the syllabus of a Swedish language night class in quantum robotics.
While doing research for my last video, episode 33, the one about bird color, the one that everyone is talking about, I came across some information so interesting that it pierced my brain like a pitchfork stabbing a zombie in that Walking Dead series. And what was it? Flamingos and baleen whales. And ducks. Sort of. Good morning.
As much as I thought I was about to learn something earth-shattering, which I often do, flamingos are not really distant relatives to baleen whales. And they're not related to ducks either. But there is a commonality between the three. Sort of. It has to do with the way they feed.
But then I came across another piece of information so sticky it nagged at me like a orthodontist at a gummy bear convention. And it was this mysterious bird fact that the closest cousin to the flamingo is the grebe. Which is crazy. And I know you're thinking that right now. Wow, Dean, that's crazy. I did not know you were going to tell me about that. And if you're an ornithologist watching this right now, please try not to lose a tail feather while I flap around trying to figure this stuff out.
We'll talk about grebes and their unusual anatomy in a bit, but for now, we'll concentrate on the very big and obvious differences between grebes and flamingos. I visited the Palm Beach Zoo in my last episode to record flamingos, and I saw something that made me want to take another look at these goofy, yet graceful, rose-colored birds. It was something I had never paid any attention to. Flamingos are specifically adapted for filtration feeding. Well, they're really more like sifters. They pump water through their beaks and sift out the good stuff. If they so choose, they can feed with their head upside down and underwater. This is the reason for the strangely shaped flamingo beak. The beak and the tongue work together to pump water in and force it out through thin plates called lamellae.
You know what other animal has lamellae? That's right, baleen whales.
Oh, and a group of flamingos is called a flamboyance. I like that. A lamella is any thin plate of tissue, either external or internal, and it can serve a wide variety of functions, from respiration to better traction for locomotion. In a group, they are referred to as lamellae, and they can be fish gills, ribs on a mushroom, or even the pads of gecko feet to help them gain traction. But the mere presence of them in two different species does not indicate zoological kinship. Or does it? I couldn't help but see a similarity in the curved skull shape of the flamingo and the skull of the baleen whale, which also uses lamellae to sift food from the water. There are 16 species of whale that make up the taxonomic group Mysticeti, the baleen whales. And unfortunately, like the flamingo, humans hunted whales almost to extinction in the 19th century and are still hunting them today. There are no whales or flamingos wandering around Lake Osborne, so why am I talking about them? Because of a duck. This duck. A group of ducks in the water is called a raft of ducks, and this particular raft of ducks magically appeared in Lake Osborne in late January. I'm not a duck lover, so I really don't pay much attention to ducks when I see them. But these ducks were so different, they stood out like a sunburned tourist at a nudist camp. And they bobbed around in a part of the lake close to my house for several days. These are Lesser Scaups, and this raft of Scaups is wintering here on Lake Osborne, I think. They're a little shy and they don't mingle with other birds, they just quietly stick together.
It's almost as if they're waiting for something. Springtime, maybe? And what do ducks have in common with flamingos and baleen whales? That's right, it's lamellae. And you saw that coming. And they use that lamellae to feed in a really interesting way.
One of the best parts of bird watching is watching birds feed. Feeding time is both entertaining and visually dynamic, and so when it happens, I'm always excited to witness it. And birds feed in different ways.
You got your stalkers, your ambushers, your sweepers, your sifters, and your grazers. And none of those categories are official at all. Those are my categories. And when it comes to ducks, you got your dabblers and your divers. Right? And you knew that. Or maybe not. I didn't know it.
Wild ducks feed in two basic ways. They either dabble at the surface or just below it, or they dive all the way under to feed at the bottom. Diving ducks are a bit different in that their legs are located farther back on their bodies to give them better propulsion underwater. The legs of dabbling ducks are more centrally located, enabling them to easily tip their bodies forward. Scaups are diving ducks, and when I took the time to watch them feed, it was like watching poetry in motion. The mottled duck, a year-round resident of Lake Osborne, is a dabbler. I first noticed their bottoms-up feeding style while recording this rather stoic and statuesque great blue heron back in 2020. Neither the heron nor the ducks were the least bit concerned about each other. These are mating pairs. The female has the darker bill with the orange tip, and the male's bills are bright yellow. Mottled ducks are monogamous only for the season. They pair up in November and stay together until the eggs are laid, and then usually separate by May. The female raises the young. Most ducks are omnivorous and will eat just about anything they can get, including handouts from humans. They don't chew their food, but they sometimes appear to be doing just that due to the rapid movements of their bills. When a duck is feeding, the quick opening and closing of their bills helps them separate the edible from the inedible using the lamellae in their mouths. Along the sides of their tongues, some ducks also have papillae, spiky projections with concentrated nerve endings to help them identify food by touch. Additional sensory receptors are located in the nail, that raised bump right on the tip of the bill, and these also help them locate and identify food as they root around in muddy or silty water. I saw this mating pair of blue-winged teals at the Wakodahatchee Wetlands Preserve. The male is the one with the white stripe on his face. They're a little drab until you see the brilliant colors on their wings that give them their name. As I mentioned before, the grebe is very duck-like, but is not a duck. And the grebe does not have lamellae. The Latin name for grebe is podylimbus, which means feet at the buttocks. Their legs, like the diving ducks, are located farther back, as grebes spend a lot of time underwater. Grebe feet aren't webbed, but are lobed, like a leaf, and they are great for swimming, but not for walking on land, which they seldom do. I am fascinated by these little birds, and for a long time I paddled around not knowing what they were. In episode 26, I showed how, to escape danger, the grebe can quickly submerge itself, like a submarine, by forcing the air out of its feathers, in this case, to avoid a passing hawk. Amazing. In February, I was lucky to record some pied-billed grebes at the Green Cay Wetlands Preserve. There were more grebes there than I have ever seen in one place, and there were some young ones too. The young grebes have these really cool striped faces. I would imagine it is good camouflage while they are developing and vulnerable. Here, the adult quickly grabs lunch for this youngster and dives again while the little one waits at the surface, occasionally looking down to see where Mom went. It's hard to imagine that this tiny aquatic bird, no bigger than a crow, is related to the flamingo. But some scientists believe that the link lies within the DNA of these two species. The number of primary feathers, 11 on each wing, other birds typically only have 9 or 10, courtship behaviors, bone structure, and in a specific calcium phosphate coating on their eggshells. And if there is a grebe-flamingo-whale connection, well, that just might be in a similar bone structure that all tetrapods share. Lizards, the reptilian ancestors to birds, whales, and whales are considered to be marine tetrapods because they actually have vestigial leg bones and once walked. Their relatives, the hippos, still do. Birds, and humans too, all have radius and ulna bones in their forelimbs. These are called homologous structures, and the theory is that homology can indicate common ancestry. So are we descendants of lizards, birds, and whales? I'm not going to touch that one, but when I'm watching a bird and suddenly feel a close connection to it, well, I don't know, I'm just saying.
The connection between flamingos and grebes is a subject of dispute among evolutionary scientists, and it's really much deeper science than I'm able to comprehend. So I'm going to let them fight it out, and I'm going to just concentrate on trying to figure out what it is I see when I'm out here. And that'll be good for me. Thanks for coming along. I mean, you aren't really here, but you know what I mean.